Hello and welcome to the Washington Times Politically Unstable. I'm Kelly Sadler, the commentary editor at the Washington Times. And today I am joined by the former governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker. He's the president of Young America's Foundation and does a lot of work on college campuses, talking to conservatives, talking to liberals, talking to students to try to bring them into the conservative movement. And, knew Charlie Kirk, should I say, and worked jointly with Turning Point USA on these college campuses. Scott, I know that you have written several columns about Charlie Kirk's legacy. Can you just kind of tell our viewers and listeners kind of what Charlie Kirk meant to you, meant to the movement, and how your organization will be carrying on some of his work?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me on, and thanks for letting me publish my thoughts in the Washington Times. It's a great opportunity to share with folks. Like so many people, obviously been grieving over the last week or so. Charlie was one of a kind on a very personal level. We had a connection. Charlie introduced me the very first time I spoke at CPAC many years ago as governor. He was the one who introduced me. He grew up in the Chicago area. He was very familiar with what was going on in Wisconsin. He was very passionate about our recall. And about a month ago, I saw him and Erica at the Cubs game when the Brewers and the Cubs were playing at Wrigley Field. And I'd never had a chance to actually talk to his parents. They were there and obviously told him how proud they should be of their son. But Charlie's father reminded me that Turning Point itself actually started the night of our recall election, June 5th, 2012, and that Charlie and his dad had felt it really was a turning point. Little did they know it was far more than just a turning point in Wisconsin politics, that his engagement, his involvement, not only with that organization, which then grew into Turning Point Action, but with everything, with his podcast, with his radio program, with his TV broadcast, with just all the different opportunities to go viral on social media. He would have such an amazing impact. Both of our sons, Tonette and I, have two boys who are adults and married now. They're 31 and 30. And so our oldest, Matt's just a few months, probably about 8-9 months younger than Charlie. And they both did things with him. Alex actually worked for a while with Turning Point before he came back to Wisconsin to work on campaigns. Even my 86-year-old mother, the day that the tragic news happened, my mom had a little thing up by her calendar of all the shows. She loved watching Huckabee until Mike went off to Israel, and Charlie was one of those shows she liked to watch on TBN. So it really showed the span of the spectrum from young people to people my age to even my parents, or at least my mother, the impact that he had. And so for us, it was obviously very personal and devastating to hear this news. But I think in the movement as a whole, for all of us, Young America's Foundation, College Republicans, Young Republicans, Leadership Institute, all the groups that are on campus, I think sometimes in Washington, not just with youth-based organizations, but with conservative groups in general, people think that the masses see distinctions. They really don't. They see a larger movement. And so kids who were actively involved with our organization often went to AmeriFest down in Arizona with Turning Point. They clearly watched Charlie on podcasts. I think in the days since, I've seen that a lot of students are hurting. They're determined. They're not backing down. They're not backing away. But I don't think we can overlook the fact that for them, this is the closest many of this kids in this generation get to something like President Kennedy being shot or 9/11. This has really been devastating for them. And I think we've got to hunker down and really show them our love and our support as people grieve, and then together figure out how we move forward.
Yeah. We learned today that Erica Kirk, Charlie's wife, is taking over Turning Point USA. She's going to be the CEO. She was unanimously confirmed by the board, and she gave a loving tribute shortly after his death, vowing that his work would continue and his legacy would continue. And I had the privilege of working with Charlie Kirk when I was at the White House, organizing a millennials event. And the conventional thought among Republicans at the time was the baby boomer generation is what's going to win us elections. We've kind of lost these millennials until they grow up, get married, have families, start paying taxes, and then and only then are they persuadable. But Charlie Kirk came in and said, no, you've got to go out on these college campuses. Yes, most of them are leftist havens. It is like walking into the lion's den, but these students, the youth, are hungry for a different perspective. They want to debate, they want to engage, and many times when Charlie went out on these campuses, the very first people in line to talk to him were people who opposed his views and wanted the debate. And he famously said, if we can't debate and have open conversation, when the debate ends, that's when the violence starts. And that is so true. Scott, given your work on college campuses, I know that many conservative speakers have come and have had to have security teams around them. A lot of them have been canceled. They've been scheduled to speak, but because of liberal outrage, the college campuses not being able to secure their safety, they've canceled their appearances. Moving forward, what should college administrators do? Should they be actively working with your organization to bring more conservative speakers to college campuses and guarantee their safety, even though security costs might escalate? And are the kids on campuses hungry for this type of debate to continue?
Well, they absolutely are. We saw it with Charlie. We've seen it with folks we've sponsored for years, like Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Katie Pavlich, you name it. There's a real hunger out there to have real debate. Two of the things we've seen for years with this generation, this Gen Z generation, is that they want authentic exchanges and they want fairness. And we can't concede any territory. I think Charlie was right. Somebody was believing that so strongly. But we've got to be, I think, mindful going forward. A phrase I used the other night when we did a Zoom conference call with students across the country, just to kind of let them know what would come next and to hear from them, was safe but strong. Safe but strong. Because I think there's these feelings out there that I hear from students that, early on they were scared, they were grieving, they were sad, they were devastated. At the same time, they were devoted, they were dedicated, they were ready to go out and do even more. And so we need to show students, no matter who they're involved with, again, no matter what the group on the conservative side, that we're going to make sure they're safe, but that we can be strong again, that we can't back down. And to that end, one of the things we're doing is sending every college and university president or chancellor, whoever the leader is, at every school in America, public and private alike, a contract asking them to commit to two things. One, they cannot use this tragedy as an excuse to not allow conservative voices on campus. As you mentioned, we've seen that before with any number of groups where we try to bring conservatives on, and either they outright block those voices or they put up these impossible barriers to doing that, and that can't happen. So we need to embrace real dialogue, real discussion across the ideological spectrum, meaning conservative, liberal, and everywhere in between. But secondly, equally, if not more importantly, we need these college and university leaders to commit to making sure that students, speakers, and staff are safe at every public event on their campus. That we're committed to doing that as we've done in the past. We've looked over the years at our protocols. We, for some time, have not had outdoor events. Tragically, sadly, that's probably going to be the case for all of us in the movement. But we've had, with people like Shapiro and others, we've already had armed security, we've had metal detectors. We're probably going to have to expand that to others. But that shouldn't just solely fall on a group like Young America's Foundation or any of the others out there. This is something that every college leader, every president, chancellor, board chair should be committed to making sure that everyone on their campus is safe, be they a student, a speaker, or a staff member. And so we're going to ask them at a bare minimum to commit to those things. And where campuses can't do that, we'll provide the resources to make sure those students can be safe. I think at the same time, there's a hunger for more. So we're going to figure out ways not only to not back down, but to add more speakers this school year, because none of our speakers, even though many of them, like the students, are concerned about safety, even this week, we upped the ante. We put more security on campuses where we had speakers already scheduled, and none of them backed down. None of the students backed away from doing that. I think that's a really important sign, but we owe it to the students to show that they can be safe and strong at the same time.
One of Charlie Kirk's, just to show how impactful he was, the event that we had at the White House was in 2018. He promised that he would build the movement, that the youth would show up and vote, and he would build this coalition. And, talking to a young guy with these aspirations, we were like, all right, let's see. In politics, a lot of people make big promises and don't deliver on anything. Well, I think in 2024 is when we saw the impact that Charlie Kirk had, especially amongst young men. President Trump won the youth vote, and amongst young men, Charlie Kirk basically, there was a 44-point gain toward Republicans among young men. And then there was another study that came out a few weeks ago. It was a poll by NBC News. And this speaks to Charlie's faith. Not only was he politically active, but his faith was very important to him, his Christianity and spreading the word of God. And it was a poll of Gen Z. Of those young men who voted for President Trump, at the top of their list of what they prioritized was to have a family, was to have children, was to get married. And then having a fulfilling job was a little lower on the list. For young women who voted for Kamala Harris, the top of their list was a fulfilling career. Way at the bottom did they prioritize children and marriage and building a traditional family, which is very dispiriting. But at the same time, for young men to be prioritizing family, faith, it was a revolution, and it was one of which Charlie Kirk, through his example, really did, I believe, bring about.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. He led the way in that regard. Again, it's important to talk about things, but it's more important to model them. And that was one of the great things he did. Again, even beyond just talking about his faith, he talked about Christ. I mean, he talked specifically about his relationship with Jesus. Again, it's one of the few, if only, comforting things in this tragedy the last week was knowing of his faith, knowing of his commitment, knowing that he is in the arms in heaven of Christ right now with our Heavenly Father. And that is, I think, something that people said, hey, this isn't just, I think up until then, there, particularly amongst younger people, millennials and Gen Z, a little bit of cynicism about, do people in politics just invoke religion, to get votes? No, he talked about it. He talked about the impact. He talked about what it meant for his life. He talked about how it brought him and Erica together. And then I think modeled it, not only with Erica, but with their children. Encourage others to do the same. Said you don't have to concede one or the other. You can still be involved. You can have a life. You can have a career. But the top of your list should be being a spouse and a parent. And I think those images have been interesting to watch. There's all sorts of, again, one of the things he'd love out of this tragedy was there's a whole wave of millions of people, particularly young people, who've never or only glimpsed at maybe some of those exchanges he's had in the past that are watching the engagements he's had on campus or at Oxford or elsewhere. But I think the most important thing has been the images of he and Erica and the kids. Again, just a great reminder that a great tribute is not only continue his legacy in terms of the conservative cause, specifically with young people, but across the board, but also to say, one of the great ways to honor a life well lived is to try and model that in the things that young people do. Get married, have kids, pursue your career as well, but make those your top priorities, your faith, your family, your friends, and the freedom that we hold so dear in this country.
Yeah, well, when Charlie was asked on a recent podcast what he wanted his legacy, how he wanted to be remembered, he said he wanted to be remembered for his faith, and for preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, which he did. And, there's been articles written of the Charlie Kirk effect that after his assassination, church goers increased in volume amongst congregations nationwide, where some of the younger children were bringing their parents to church to pray for Charlie and his family, but to also kind of tap into, our Judeo-Christian roots, really, as a country, and rediscover that. So hopefully, with time, there can maybe be a revival, but that will take time. So, concluding, moving forward, this is such a contentious time. There's so many people who are spewing vile online, celebrating his assassination. Jimmy Kimmel, most recently, was canceled from late night TV after kind of smearing MAGA Republicans, calling us the ones that led to Charlie Kirk's assassination. There's just so much misinformation out there. People taking his words out of context, misrepresenting them. It seems like sympathizing with the assassin, not Charlie or his family. How do we as a country move forward? Because I don't know if unity will come until Democrats stop calling their political opponents fascists, Nazi, Hitler. And we're still seeing a lot of that online.
Yeah, and sadly, I can recall quite a bit of that, particularly the early days when they went after me. I still remember the images, the signs with the Hitler mustache and all those same terms. And that's really, obviously even above and beyond just this circumstance, troubling, because there's no comparison when you think of the horrific evils that someone like Adolf Hitler and those associated with them in Nazi Germany involved. I mean, there's just night and day comparison, no matter how much you disagree with somebody. I just think that's dangerous. You can have passionate debates in America. You can be frustrated with where people take it. Certainly, Lord knows, there's plenty of people on the left that I just passionately disagree with. But I do think you're right. It's dangerous. They can do it in America. It's unfortunate, but they can do it under the First Amendment. But as we've seen this week, there are consequences of that, not necessarily with the government cracking down, but so many employers who, regardless of whether they were conservative or not, said, these just don't fit with our principles. This is not what we expect out of people who work in our business, organization, or college in some case. And that's been heartening to see that people said, no. Now, where credit should be given, and I don't ever agree politically with Gavin Newsom, but he came right out immediately. He's one of those examples. As frustrated as I am with others, I should, point credit where credit's due. In this case, immediately came out. And I think part of that is because he had Charlie on his podcast. He actually saw there was a real human being there. He could relate to that and talked about how horrible and devastating that was. We need to have more exchanges like that. We need to have a better understanding like that. And we need to call out people who are on the fringes saying these horrible, awful things in hopes that employers will say, hey, that doesn't represent my values, regardless of where you stand politically. And I think we're going to see more of that, but we can't be afraid. I believe in many of these instances, some of the things I just saw at one of the campuses in my home state of Wisconsin, some of the horrible things they did over a tribute that some students had chalked on the ground and some of the things that they wrote. And I said, besides calling that out, we need to be mindful that that's intentional. That's not just lashing out against Charlie Kirk. That's trying to intimidate students on our campuses. And we need to keep them safe, but we need to prop them up and support them and say, no, we're not going to be intimidated. We're not going to back down. We're going to be rational. We're going to be reasonable. We're going to use the model that Charlie and others have done, and that is have dialogue, listen to people oppose you, give them a chance to be heard, but then don't be afraid to point out where you think they're wrong and an error on those issues. And that's what America's all about. We should be able to have those sorts of debates, but in a way that is civil and just and doesn't put our fellow Americans' life or even their health at risk.
All right. Well, Governor Scott Walker, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your work with Charlie Kirk. Good luck moving forward, forging ahead with Young America's Foundation. Your work is so important. And, as is spreading the gospel and letting these college students hear the conservative point of view is so important, and helping with their safety and security, especially with those speakers, is also essential work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.